I'm Wendy Pease of Rapport International. We provide high quality translation and we specialize in the medical device industry. We match the right person for the subject matter, what the device does, and the language pair, and they only translate into their native language so they understand all the cultural innuendos and references that need to happen, and they've got the subject matter expertise. So I think you've heard some of the stories about potential consequences of inaccurate medical device translation. Number one is patient safety. Number two is the regulatory compliance issues. And number three can be reputational damage. So you do not want to use AI and you do not want to use Google Translate to do medical device translation, unless it's a casual email that you get from someone along the way and you just want to know what it says. There's a few other places you can reach out to me and I'll let you know, but generally you want to use a human. I want to talk in this video about the 8 biggest challenges for medical device translation. All right, number one is the technical jargon and the complex terminology. There's a lot that if you're in the industry, you just get, but people who may be using your devices around the world may not. Another thing that goes along with the complex terminology is how do you name your medical device? We've worked with newly released devices and items that are doing patent research and filing for patents and then launching it. There's basically 3 ways to do it. One is to come up with a name in the language that seems to make sense. Another is to keep it in English. And then the other one is to keep it in English and then put a descriptor afterwards. And so there's a lot of thought that needs to go into the way that you want to do it. If you're not careful to hire somebody that is aware of the industry, you can run into a situation that I heard about before. So on each of the biggest challenges, I'm going to give an issue and then what's important to be aware of. So the issue that we had was a client came to us and they were talking about medical aids like canes or walkers. And whoever had done the translation, we don't know if it was a person or we don't know if they put it into Google Translate, but it came to us with AIDS translated like the disease. And so our translator was very upset about this. He said, this is just incorrect. It would be confusing. It's wrong. I don't know who did this translation or how, but it's a good thing that they had it proofed so it was caught. So what's important is, again, to have somebody that understands the words and they can separate out. Number 2 of the 8 biggest challenges is regulatory compliance. You know, the regulatory landscape is always changing. And MDR Article 19.1 now says the EU Declaration of Conformity requires translation into an official union language or languages required by member states where the device is offered. So if you're not following that, you're out of regulatory compliance. And if you provide a poor translation, then you could run into issues with liability. There was an instance with this. BBC News had done an article that between 1989 and 2006, a device went out and the users of it, they were radiologists who were treating cancer patients. And they didn't have manuals translated into their language. So they took the English and they used an automated translation. And the radiologist spoke French and they didn't get it. So some of the patients were getting up to 20% higher radiology than they needed. And it led to deaths and long-term complications. So their liability on that was very high. That was the issue. Here's the importance. Find a translation provider that has industry specialty and is not using automated translation with post-human editing, because unless they're really have a good LLM or large language model that's building off the history, and unless they have a very good editor, you're really risking some of these mistakes. Number 3 is cultural sensitivity and adaptation. When you talk about things in another language, you want to make sure that your audience is really understanding how the medical device is going to be used. So the issue isn't a medical device, but it's a suppository versus taking an oral medication. The patient didn't understand the word suppository in the explanation. And so they read that, oh, I'm supposed to take it once a day. So they were swallowing the suppositories rather than putting them where they belong. So it's really important that the person who is doing the translation understands the uses, and if people in the culture are going to be familiar with a certain kind of medical treatment or device, so they can actually make it clear or come back to the client, come back to you and say, this isn't going to be clear. Can we add some verbiage that will make it more clear? And this is going to help with your market acceptance, limiting risk, market penetration, overall outcomes, and ultimately patient safety. Number 4, consistency and accuracy. You would think it's a no-brainer to keep the same translator or translation team involved from when you do IP research to when you're working through regulatory, through any clinical trials, and then through commercialization. What we have seen is that different departments will go out and just find somebody because they're not coordinating their translation efforts. And then what happens is you can have a different name, you can have instructions for use that are different. You lose that consistency of voice going across. And if you don't maintain that consistent terminology, it causes confusions and issues for patient safety. So it's really important to use an agency that's going to help you develop glossaries or translation memory. This is where automation is really helpful, because the automation can come in and say, oh, yes, you've translated that word or that sentence or that paragraph or that document before. Let's reuse that so you've got the consistency of voice. Number 5, risk of misinterpretation. Okay, is it bad translation or is it misinterpretation? So there are subtle differences, but the meanings don't matter, because still the liability is going to end up with the medical device company. So the issue or the example is, a few years back, the FDA issued a warning letter to a Chinese company because it listed hydrocortisone as the active ingredient when the investigators found that the product contained dexamethasone acetate. And the Chinese company said it was a translation error. So this is something where the translator probably didn't understand the difference between the two and knew that it was anti-itch, and they may have slipped it in there, or they used some sort of automated translation. So what's really important here is that you can't just use anybody that's bilingual to do a translation. When we're looking for translators or interpreters, we're looking for people who have been trained and have experience, because if they don't understand something or it's culturally not appropriate, they're going to bring that back and ask questions about it and clarify the issue. They're not just going to substitute words. I've heard of multiple examples of where people aren't experienced. They don't think they can ask. They say, oh, it's good enough. They slip something out there and it causes a major problem afterwards. In addition, you want to look for a translations agency that has proofreading, quality assurance, client reviews, secondary editing, and some sort of satisfaction guarantee, so you get that uniformity. I know of many language companies that just assign projects out to whoever's available. They don't make sure that the same person is signed to the company to get that consistency. Number 6, confidentiality and data security. This is huge right now. When you're developing a medical device, it takes a lot of time and investment. And you want to make sure that data privacy and security are following through your translation. You want to retain ownership. You want to have an NDA. You want to make sure that they're not using any AI or Google Translate or any automation that's going to help build another LLM for somebody else's use. So make sure that's all locked down. So the issue I want to talk about is the Association of Business Trial Lawyers recommends that lawyers refrain from using online translation tools such as Google Translate, because courts have found them inadmissible due to insufficient reliability. And there's even case laws that say that, quote, voluntary disclosure of privileged documents to third parties destroys the attorney-client privilege, protecting confidential, full and frank discussion, unless that third party's contributions are nearly indispensable for facilitating the conversation for legal advice. So if you're just going out to anybody or you're going out to an automated tool, you could destroy the confidential nature of any of the material. So when you're hiring a translation agency, make sure that you retain the patents, the material, the content, the copyrights, the trademarks, and that it's fully locked down for confidentiality. Number 7, for biggest challenges for translation in medical device industries, and this could probably go across all industries, but it's time and budget constraints. And we know in life sciences and medical device, biotech, being first to market is really important. That's where you're really going to be successful. And you've got deadlines for filings. You've got to respond to regulatory agencies at certain times. So you're always under time pressures. And you need to depend on your translation company for on-time delivery. Now, I never thought this would have been a differentiator. I thought that that is just basic. You've got to deliver projects on time. Well, we hired a marketing strategist to look into our differentiators and see where we were special. And for over 14 years since we started tracking, and I've been the owner for about 20 years, we've delivered all our translations on time. We didn't track them before. We know we had a good on-time rate, but for 14 years, we've been tracking it. It's part of our project management culture and system to do this. So when you're talking to your translation agency, ask them about on-time delivery as well as quality. And finally, number 8, let's talk about formatting and design. Good translation is more than the language. It also is preparing the content. What format is it coming in on so it can go in clearly, it can be translated clearly. What is the interface? Is it a website? Is it a program? Is it an app? Is it a manual? Is it product labels, instructions for use, interactive marketing materials? You want to work with an agency that can take that all into account. Do they need to get it ready for translation? And then afterwards, do they need to get it for consumption? We personally work with our client on how they want us to. If you want to do the layout and have us proof it, that's fine. But all in the project intake, we're going to figure that out. So it's print ready or consumption ready at the end. So here's an issue that we've seen is we've provided content to our client's layout person, and spacing and capitalization varies. For example, German capitalizes all their nouns, and that's very different from writing in English. And they use umlauts, the 2 dots over the letter. Spanish uses the tilde over the N to get the ñ. Arabic may be laid out from right to left, or it may not be. Chinese may be read left to right or top to bottom, depending on the materials and where it's going to be used. If the layout person doesn't know the language and the accepted layout for that, they may make mistakes on that. So we've seen plenty of that on layout proofs, and then somebody has to go in and redo it. So it's important to understand whoever you're using for layout or web developer, that they're familiar with what the generally accepted procedures are to lay something out so the audience can read it. And that they're familiar with the fonts, because if you create something in an English font, that may not carry over to another language. So having somebody that's familiar with all that, along with colors and images and graphics and innuendos, that layout person has a lot of feedback. So we work with somebody who just does multilingual layout. She knows all the graphic programs. She's not a creative designer. She just does the multilingual layout, and she speaks about 5 languages. So that really helps. Okay, so our solutions and differentiators for Rapport International, I've talked about it a lot. We specialize in medical device translations. We can help you meet MDR. We do a lot of CE marks. We've done IP research and filings, regulatory documents, package inserts, IFUs. We take the time to match somebody. And when our clients come to us, they stay with us because we're focused on building a relationship. In addition, if you're thinking about how you manage this through the product life cycle, we can help you build a translation management plan. We do have a white paper on our website that you can go download to give you the strategy about how you go about doing it to build it out so you save time and money over the process. I am doing this video to make sure that you don't become a story on the BBC or discussed at a legal conference. So if you know anybody that's in the biotech, life sciences, or medical device industry that wants to know more about translation or has questions, I am always happy to talk anytime. And if you have any additions or comments on this, if you think I said something wrong, or if you have something to add, I'd love to hear it. I always treat this like a dialogue. So thanks so much for listening. I hope you learned something helpful.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, or you can keep watching. And don't miss out on new posts by subscribing to our channel. And if you want to talk to Rapport International about all your translation and interpretation needs, or about growing your business into new markets, use the link below for a free 30-minute consultation.